Very good evening to you. Welcome again to the Friday Conversations. If you were with us last week, then Matt led a very helpful prayer and some singing. But this evening we're beginning a new series on discipleship. So I'm Clive, this is Fiona, and we're going to be talking about the calling of the first disciples. So this series, there's about 6 sessions, I think, that we've planned, but we're going to intersperse it with a couple of interviews with people. So some of the Fridays will be different, and because people appreciated so much the prayer meeting last Friday, we might well include one of those as well. So it might be a bit longer than 6 weeks before we get to the end of the series. But the first session is... excuse the lorries passing by. when we were in the Salvation Army Training College, sometimes they did recordings, and we were on the flight path of the Heathrow Airport, weren't we? Yeah. So sometimes they were making professional recordings, and then aircraft will be going over the top. We've just got big lorries. So. Do you want to say anything about this series as we start it, Fiona?
Well, I thought you just more or less summed it up. We're going to talk about discipleship. This evening we're talking particularly about being called to be disciples, and what that all entails.
Okay. So, your definition of a disciple, that might be helpful.
Yes.
When Jesus said to the rich young man, "Go sell your possessions and give to the poor and come follow me," do you think that's a command for everybody? You know, what's the level of giving up that we've got to do to be disciples? And we're going to be looking at that as we go through. So welcome to the people who have signed on. If you've got live chat, you can make comments, you can query what we're saying. Sometimes people just exchange conversations over the live chat, but it's meant to be relevant to the study. Yeah. So we're going to begin. I think I've got Matthew 4. Is that where you?
Yes, that's where I've got as well.
Do you want to read that? 18. So Matthew chapter 4, and the heading they've put in this version of the Bible, it's not in the original text. But because we keep saying it, there were no chapter verses, and there were no chapters, and there were no numbers at the verses. It was all one account. Yeah. But they've called it here the calling of the first disciples.
So do you want me to read it?
Why not?
Yeah. Okay. As Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw 2 brothers, Simon, called Peter, and his brother Andrew. They were casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. "Come follow me," Jesus said, "and I will make you fishers of men." At once they left their nets and followed him. Going on from there, he saw 2 other brothers, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John. They were in a boat with their father Zebedee, preparing their nets. Jesus called them, and immediately they left the boat and their father and followed him.
So that's Matthew's account. Very similar to Mark's account, and previously we've done studies on Mark's Gospel, and we're aware that Mark got a lot of his information from Peter, who is one of the characters here. Yeah. Luke has some additional material, and John is quite different. But we're going to stay with Matthew for the moment. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Let me begin. Well, I've started already, but let me continue, should I say? Yeah. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, he said, when Jesus calls some, he bids them to come and die. And Dietrich Bonhoeffer literally did have to pay with his life to be a disciple of Jesus. But it is that principle of Jesus calling us, but maybe at the beginning we're not altogether too sure of what entails.
No. Well, I'm sure these people really had no idea exactly what they were letting themselves in for. Although obviously this wasn't their first encounter with Jesus. They were already people who were listening to him and getting to get interested in him. Because yes, it isn't that there's some kind of ooh-ah staring into middle distance weirdness about this, that somebody who's never seen him before is suddenly walking off and following him. And equally, Jesus wouldn't be arriving staring into middle distance saying, come follow me, like you've seen in some rather weird films. Now actually these people obviously did know him and he knew them, but this is the point at which he's actually saying to them, now there's a whole new phase of your life starting. I want you to leave everything you've been doing and follow me.
Yes, yes. Just as background history, some of them had been disciples of John the Baptist. And Jesus said of John the Baptist, there was no one born of woman greater than John the Baptist in his era. But a mark of the man is that John willingly let his disciples go and directed them to go and follow Jesus. So there's a whole background, there's a whole history there.
Well, yes, because John's job was to prepare people for the coming of Jesus, to make ready for the Lord a people prepared. And obviously these men were prepared.
Yes.
And when Jesus called, they were ready to answer.
People are responding, and we're very glad about that. Maggie says, she's put a question mark after it. Is a disciple somebody who follows a teacher? And Sally's written, I understand discipleship as being a learner and a follower with the purpose of becoming like the teacher. Why don't these people come and sit here and conversate? Well, Sally does sometimes. But a disciple, it wasn't a new phrase, it wasn't a new idea. It is exactly as been said, an apprentice.
It's somebody's pupil.
Somebody's pupil.
Who's sort of learning from them. And I mean, most of the rabbis that were leading the Jewish people at the time would have had disciples. Who sat at their feet and listened to their teaching. And
even back into the Old Testament, you had the prophets, and there is the school of the prophets. People were taught in these ways, and certainly in the time of Jesus, the rabbis. Let's just do some background on these men, though. They were fishermen. And we could imagine quite successful at their business. Experienced, got a good thing going, but not of the highest status in society.
No, that's right. They weren't sort of nobles or sort of high-flying politicians or anything. They were, fishermen who earned their living by catching fish.
It's wrong to say sons of the soil because they were fishermen, but
sons of the sea.
Sons of the sea. Okay. Yes. And which ties in with what Paul says about not many of you were of noble birth, and coming from the higher stratas of society, and for some, well, when we look at Matthew, who was a tax collector, actually not the most popular.
Exactly. Yes, he was definitely. He wouldn't have been people's expected choice, would he?
Not at all. Not at all. So, in some sense, when Jesus is gathering the first group of disciples around him, on a human level, you might think, well, that's an unlikely bunch.
Yes. Well, and they were a very mixed bunch. When you read, because later on, are we going later on to where he chooses the 12?
You can do.
And
you're in charge.
Luke tells us that he spent a whole night in prayer before that point, and then he chose the 12. And when you actually read through the list, they're a very varied bunch, and not a particularly likely bunch, and they're probably a bunch that found it quite difficult getting on with each other at times. I mean, you mentioned Matthew, who was a tax collector, so he was a collaborator with the occupying Roman regime. And then you've got Simon the Zealot, who was obviously one of the ones who was looking to join the rebel band to overthrow the Roman government. And here they are both in the same group of disciples, just to take two examples. But yes, they're a very motley bunch, so they're going to have to learn to get along with each other as well as learning from Jesus.
Yes, well, they work together as brothers in the business, but then other people are added to the group, so they've got to expand their circle, which is a salutary lesson for all of us as disciples.
Yes.
Other people are on the journey too.
Yes. So again, I mean, I suppose we all rather like the idea perhaps of sitting at Jesus' feet and having the one-to-one times with him, but actually the whole thing about discipleship as we find it in the New Testament is that it actually involves being part of a group.
Yes.
It's not a solo run, a contemplative life thing. It's actually, it's very much rooted in learning to work out human relationships, not just with the Lord himself, but actually with all the rest of the hoi polloi who are also having to work out how to get on with you.
Yes, yes. Just another question there. So we're looking at this text, and Jesus walks along by the Sea of Galilee and then calls them to follow him. What do you think is so unusual about that? Let me just read it again. The men were casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. Come, follow me, Jesus said, and I will make you fishers of men. There's something unusual about that. So, if you've got some thoughts on that. I was reading, I've forgotten where, but on that idea of being with other people and with the Lord, somebody had commented that from this point onwards in the life of Jesus, he's never alone.
No.
The gospel. I know sometimes he goes to the hills to
it doesn't
pray.
mean that he's never in a room by himself.
No, but his ministry, his life is surrounded with his disciples and other people who follow until it comes to Gethsemane. And so it is, as disciples, we're called into a community. If we're called to be with the Lord, inevitably we will be called to be with other
the rest
people.
Of them.
And I think it's because Jesus likes company. And he was well known for going to parties and meals and being very sociable.
Yes. Well, I mean, human beings are created not to be alone. God said right at the very beginning that it's not good for man to be alone. No. And actually, given that we're reflecting the image of God, who is love, well, love requires somebody to love.
Yes.
You can't love in a vacuum. So yes, it is actually that human beings were created to be in community, and I think one of the most awful aspects of the fall of creation is that community has got so spoiled, and the divisions and the jealousies and the suspicions and all the rest of it, which are part of fallen nature, have actually spoiled what we're created for. But and here's Jesus, yes, he's gathering a group of people to be with him, to actually share his life with him and to learn from him and eventually to be equipped to continue his ministry. But actually he also
needed
because he's fully human, so he requires, they're actually being called to be with him. Actually he wants companionship as well. And also, of course, he has to demonstrate how you get on with people who aren't always easy to get on with.
Nobody has commented so far. You might have thought about it. That posed the question: what is different about this call? And we said earlier about the rabbis having a school, having pupils with him, and as far as we understand, those people chose which rabbi they would like to sit at their feet. So, because there were many teachers in Israel, and people would say, well, I like his style, I like what his approach, how he handles people, I think I'll go and learn with him. But we notice with this, what's different here?
Yes, the choice is actually Jesus' choice, not theirs. It isn't that they've kind of looked at all the possible people they could follow and decided which one they most relate to. Actually, here it's Jesus who says, I'll have you, yes. I want you to come with me. In John's Gospel, isn't it? He says, you did not choose me. I chose you.
Yes.
And that's...
Yes. That is quite a distinctive thing. And just in preparing for this evening, took out the library this book, which is David Watson. When was this produced? It's a bit of
when we were young.
When we were young. 1933? No, that was when he was born. I was going to say he wasn't. No. Anyway, it's been around for decades, and it's called Discipleship. And on that point, I was quite struck by a comment David Watson makes when he's talking about Christians, all disciples, having been chosen by the Lord. There's just a few sentences here. He says, the Christian church suffers from large numbers who feel that they have made a decision for Christ, or from those who think that they have chosen to join a certain church. So, there were options around, and I think I'll be a Christian, or I'll go and join that church. This is quite the telling comment he makes. Such man-centered notions spell spiritual death, or at least barren sterility. It is only when we begin to see ourselves as chosen, called, and commissioned by Christ that we shall have any real sense of our responsibility to present our bodies to Him as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God. Mm. And Fiona quoted that verse from John, you didn't choose me, but I chose you. And it's quite something when the enormity of that hits us, that the Son of the living God has... I'm always quoting old songs, but there's a song which we used to sing, so glad he laid his hand on me. I had a Chinese security guard place his hand on my shoulder as I was trying to take Bibles into China, and that I've been caught. But it's when somebody places their hand on you,
yes.
I say, I'm taking you, I want you. Yeah. Yes. And it's not sort of like, would you like to come and follow me? It's like, well, please, could you think about it for a while? It is casting the net into the lake, they were fishermen. Come, follow me, said Jesus. It's quite direct. Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. So obviously they have a choice whether they'll obey that call.
Yes.
But actually, I wonder if they'd already been hearing him, how many of them were sort of thinking, wow, he really wants me. What a chance.
Right, Sally's making a comment here. Probably not what you're thinking of, Clive. Well, it doesn't matter. But I always notice that they don't seem to question Jesus or hesitate to go, and Jesus doesn't go into the details of his expectations.
No.
We're going on an adventure. We're going on a journey.
Yeah. And of course it's going to be about Jesus' purpose, not theirs. And that's the big switch, I think, that comes. I know certainly for myself, when I think about my journey to becoming a Christian, that there was a period when I was looking at the different religions, different ideas, sort of trying to see which one to go for. I was actually looking for what was true, rather than which one suits my personal taste. I wanted to find the God who was real. But there was that sense that I was looking, I was sort of offering myself to him. But then about a year after the first time I went forward in a Salvation Army meeting and knelt at a mercy seat, I remember this, the second time I did that, there was just this sense that somehow, and I can remember being really scared and asking for courage because I wasn't sure I had the courage to do it, but this sense that he was somehow calling me, and I didn't know what for or where it was going to lead or anything. I just knew that suddenly I was kind of aware that the plans weren't mine. He was actually calling me for something. He wasn't telling me what, but he was basically saying, will you follow me? Will you do what I want you to do?
Yes.
Basically, will you sign an unread agreement?
it's a whole nother story, and some people in our church know it, and I'm not trying to repeat it, but we had to make a really life-changing decision in our ministry years and years ago, and we wanted the Lord to fill out the details so that we could, we'd know what to do. And he very clearly just said to me, I've told you to move and you haven't moved, to go, to act.
Yes.
And then it was in the acting when we actually started to move the direction of our life.
Because we'd said to him, we know you want us to go, so show us where to go and when to go, and we'll go. And he says, you haven't moved yet.
So, it's like the 10 lepers. As they went, they were healed. And as we begin to follow Jesus, then we walk by faith, a step at a time. And as Sally says, we don't know all. And he doesn't tell us. Maybe that's a mercy of God that he doesn't tell us all that's entailed.
Well, let's face it, if at this point he'd said to them, would you like to follow me? You're all going to end up on crosses, which they did. Well, apart from James, who got beheaded by or whatever, John, or killed with a sword. But for Peter and Andrew, that's what happened to them. Well, they probably wouldn't have been able to take that at that point. As Jesus says to them later, there's many more things I have to tell you, but you can't bear them yet. He sort of waits till you're ready for it. But the thing is, he's calling them to be with him. And I think that's the key thing.
I think that's what we need to talk about for a moment. It isn't to just learn a body of teaching and get hold of some ideas and sort out your thinking. So you couldn't find the book, but this picture of, being a disciple, part of it is you are walking behind. Somebody's going ahead, and you're. But that picture you had of sort of their footsteps creating the dust.
Yes, I forget which book it was I was reading, but they were sort of saying how there was this phrase, being in the dust of your rabbi. In other words, you're following very close behind him. So the dust he's kicking up, you're in it, and that's sort of the picture of what it means, that you're actually close to him all the time. It's a relationship with him. It's not just reading his books, watching his videos, signing up to his teaching,
or even being in the audience and clapping when he does something good.
It's actually being with him, involved with him, following him. Your life is actually spent with him. It's about relationship with him first and foremost.
Which was a problem for Peter when Jesus was on trial, because people say, you've been with him, and then we know he denied it at that time. But they were known to be literally followers of Jesus. Well, where he went, they were the and then learning the same ways that he was teaching them, because he sends them out in his name. So people would say, so what are you doing here? Well, we've come in the name of Jesus.
And yes, as you say, it's not just about learning his philosophy in order to pass it on. It's actually learning his ways, becoming like him in your character, and understanding what makes him tick, understanding what motivates him, and beginning to share that. That's what it's about. It's really quite a character, life transforming experience.
Fiona shared her experience. So it was a year after committing her life to Christ, just that sense of calling. You're limited in how much you can write, but if anybody wants to write in and just say, was there a time, because we understand it's a huge turnaround. We come to Christ because we have our needs. But there comes a moment in the Christian life when it's turned round, and as Matt has said in the sermon, and we say it repeatedly, when we realise it's not about me, it's about him. And if anybody is able to put into a sentence or two, was there a time when that happened? Because when we're being saved, we know God is calling us, but when we know he's calling us for discipleship and to carry on his work, and
yes,
that's another step, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
So, you know, if you feel like it, if you can write something in briefly, that would be very helpful, because just a few more minutes and then we're going to go notice and songs, but just to keep on that idea of that being with him. Again, one of the authors I was reading in preparation for this was making the point that between the death and resurrection of Jesus, and we know, like from the story of Emmaus, you know, they were downcast, they had hoped that this was the Messiah, and this writer was saying, what was it, what brought them so much grief? Because they had his, you know, they'd heard his words, they could imitate his teaching, they'd learned that, quite a bit of that, they could tell his story, but what was missing? And it was him.
Yeah.
He was gone. He wasn't there. And the joy of the Easter morning when they discover, actually, he's here.
He's here again.
He's here again. And we can be with him. Well, he's come to be with us, and we can be with him. And then the realization, as the story unfolds, what he said, that another comforter will come to be with you forever. I will not leave you abandoned as orphans. And that sense that the Lord is with you, not just theoretically, but he is.
Yeah.
That's discipleship.
Yes.
And then in every situation we know we're the Lord's working in and with us and through us in that. Yeah. Yes. There's a comment here from Maggie. Let's just see. Maggie's saying, I've found that following Christ really is a step at a time.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have to obey what we hear God saying, but we don't know how it will work out in practice.
Yeah, and that's where the faith comes in, isn't it? It's you know, that he doesn't have to sort of convince me and explain and win me.
No.
That actually I'm committed to obey him.
So why would you trust him? Why? No, I've given the answer. Did that wrong. Why would you obey him?
Because I trust him.
Oh, I gave a game away. But that's it. As the disciples, more and more, they could learn to trust him.
Well, that's right. I mean, after spending the time they did with him and discovering that actually, although it was sort of so outside their experience so much of the time, and yet, you know, their needs were met.
Yes.
And what they'd been longing for, they were actually beginning to see, and they were learning a whole new way, and they were sort of looking forward to this new kingdom he's talking about. They were getting very excited about it. So really, you know, they've seen that whatever situation they're in, even though they're sometimes at a loss, Jesus never is. He always knows what to do. And when you're with somebody like that, you feel quite safe. You know, it's like I've heard somebody saying just recently about a situation where because of who they knew was in charge, they said, well, I know I'm in a safe pair of hands there. And that thing, if you know you're in a safe pair of hands, then even if you're a bit out of your comfort zone, if you know the guy with you is fine, you can trust him.
We will go to the song notices in a minute, but just saying that about trust, and I haven't written down the reference. Where is it where he tells them to go out into deeper water? I thought I'd written it down. But the story where they're fishing and not catching anything. And Jesus says, "Go out into deeper water." Have you found it?
No, not yet. Find it by the time we've had the song.
Okay, well I'll tell the story. And they have this great catch of fish, and their response is that they are afraid. You know, because who is this? I thought
get
it
a
was
cross reference from the second time that happens. Hold everything.
Just put the kettle on for a minute.
It's Luke 5.
Luke 5.
7. Let me go back to Luke. I knew where the second time was in John.
Yeah. But it'll be worth reading, and then we go.
Okay. Yes, here we are.
Yes.
Shall I read it?
Yeah, it's just
the whole thing?
No,
or just the thing?
Okay. Verse 4.
Right. So when Jesus finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch." Simon answered, "Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything. But because you say so, I will let down the nets." And when they had done so, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. So they signalled to partners in the other boat to come and help them. And they came and filled both boats so full that they began to sink.
Do the next paragraph, yeah.
When Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, "Go away from me, Lord, I'm a sinful man." For he and his companions were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken. And Jesus said to Simon, "Don't be afraid, from now on you will catch men."
But that's the phrase I wanted to get to. This what is going on here.
Yes.
And Jesus repeatedly saying to the disciples, don't be afraid.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid. And that growing trust
yes.
that allows them to obey. And the journey began with that call.
Yes.
And as we've been saying, called never quite sure to what, but don't be afraid.
Because actually, once your heart's been captured by him, he's the one you can't do without. Yes. So basically, wherever he's going,
yes,
you want to be there because you don't want to lose him.
Okay, we'll take the short interval. Then we will talk about this leaving everything, what that actually means for us, and the teaching of Jesus on that. So, okay, listen to the notices, enjoy the song. We'll be back in a moment.
Welcome back. We've just had a couple of comments that have been coming in while we've been listening to the notices and song, which I'm just going to read out now. Following on from Maggie saying about, sometimes we have to obey what God's saying, but we don't know how it'll work out in practice. And then Maggie was saying, for her, the awareness came through the teaching of the University Christian Union and Project, I'm not sure what that is. I learnt that Jesus has to be Lord of my life and not just my Saviour, which is a very big shift, yeah. And Alan has sent in a message from Pam saying, Pam says, and here's an old song for you, dear.
I like the old songs.
Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey.
Called When We Walk with the Lord.
That's right, yes. And then Sally's put in something. I've been learning in the last 5 years or so that it's not about me, and realising just how wrapped up in myself I've been in the past. So much to learn, and learning the lessons isn't pleasant, but very necessary. And then she goes on, yes, Maggie, I think I'd been a Christian a long time before I learnt about the Lordship. And then Maggie's back in the conversation again. I think that even when we know it in theory, it has to be worked out again and again in our lives. So easy to put our own desires first, as you say, Sally, however long we've been disciples. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a helpful conversation, because people can criticise Christians who are in church that we make mistakes and we're fallible and we get things wrong. But that's what we are. We are disciples who are learning. Yes. And unfortunately, sometimes we learn through our mistakes. Sometimes we learn through getting it right.
Well, actually, if you read the New Testament, these 12 who were with Jesus all the time were not instant perfect saints. No. Sometimes he's actually having to sort out their squabbles and their disputes and their power games, and rebuke them when they get things wrong. So yes. Yes. Yeah. We're in good company in that we're works in progress.
Yes. Well, and that's part of the call to be a disciple. And I'm tended saying this at the beginning. The Great Commission isn't go and make converts. It isn't go and get people to attend a church service. It certainly isn't go and tell people how to be nice to each other. The Great Commission at the end of Matthew's Gospel is go and make disciples. And we've had people in our church who've been experienced Christians, and that has come as a revelation. They think, I didn't realise that the call is to make disciples. Yeah. And excuse me, that's my tea repeating on me. The Bible tells us that although we want as many as possible to come into the kingdom, it isn't a numbers game.
No.
That go and get a large congregation or build a large church.
Impress people with your statistics.
Yes. It's make disciples.
Yeah.
And if with a small group of people who are disciples, you can be more effective than with a large group of people who are doing their own
just
thing.
A congregation
Just
watching.
Yeah. So it comes down to that phrase that Jesus says, I will make you.
Yeah.
And to them it was fishers of men. You'll be catching fish, you're going to help bring people into the kingdom.
Yeah.
But that's a very important phrase, isn't it?
Yes.
I will make you.
I will make you.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, Sally and Maggie seem to be quick on the keyboard this evening. Perhaps other people would as well. What do we understand? That'd be interesting. Your thoughts. I will make you. What do you think he's making us into? Because when he called Nathaniel, and you preached on this recently, didn't you?
Yes.
He knew Nathaniel. He'd seen him.
Yes.
And when Jesus calls him, calls people. Do you think he had an idea where this would go with them? Because, like he said to Peter,
yes, you're Simon, you shall be Peter. Yes.
Yeah.
Which means you are. Yeah. Simon means reed. Peter means rock.
Yes.
So basically, I'm going to change you.
Yeah, and he could see the potential in Peter. It's not automatic, but certainly he understands the potential within people.
I suppose actually it's quite exciting in a way on one hand, the fact that he knows what we are, so he can't get disillusioned with you because he never had any illusions to start with. He knows what he's getting with us. But he also knows what we were created to be, and what the original design for us is, and what we could be once the Holy Spirit has really sort of taken control of us. And so it's like he's not put off by what we already are. Because unless you're quite an arrogant sort of person, you don't sort of think, gosh, isn't he lucky getting me? You sort of think, why on earth is he picking me, would be the more likely thing. But actually, he sees what you can be, and he has the power and the ability to make that come to pass.
Yes.
And if we just continue to be his disciples and cooperate with him, that's what will come about eventually.
Yes. I was talking with somebody, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, so I've got to be careful how I say that. I was talking with somebody, a man who was not in a good place, and he was boasting that he didn't need anybody, and he didn't look to anybody for help, and his life was not good, his life had not been good. So I said to him, so you're a self-made man? Yes, I am. And I looked at him, I thought, yeah, that's what you are. You're a self-made man. And the whole difference when we're made by Jesus. Yes. Yeah. Maggie's put a comment in, let's see that. And then Maggie said, Jesus wants to make us like him, but of course this is a gradual process.
Yes.
Yeah. So do you want to expand on this? I will make
well, if you've been captured by the sort of the vision of what he's got in mind, and we only get a dim glimpse of it, but it's enough to make you think, yeah, that's where I want to be, that's what I want to be, I want to be like him, then it is an exciting process, but it's sort of realising that he's in charge of the process, and he knows what will be the best thing at each stage in your life. Because often, we would like to skip bits, or we'd like him to zap us a bit more rather than mould and shape us. So it does mean that sometimes we're going through quite difficult experiences, sometimes sad or sorrowful ones, sometimes ones where actually our natural instinct is to rebel, because I don't want to do this, and we all of us have a bit of a resistance to being told what to do. But actually, if you've got the vision of what his purpose is, then it enables you to choose to say, okay, Lord, I don't know what you're doing in this situation, but I'm trusting that you're actually working something good through this. Mm-hmm. And so it means you can have a different perspective even when you're in difficult places, because you know that he's in charge, and if he's putting you through this, then he's going to do something good with it, because he's in the business of making you a reflection of the glory of God, which is what we were meant to be.
Sally's reference Philippians 2:13, for it is God who works in you to will and to act according to his good purpose.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. That's the other encouraging bit, isn't it? We don't have to do it by our own efforts. You know, I must try harder, I must do better, and then failing again. Actually, he has, because he's given us his Holy Spirit, he works it in us.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And all we have to do is just not resist and rebel, but cooperate, and we find that actually he enables us to be different from what we would naturally be. You know, it's quite rewarding, you know, sometimes, especially if it's one of those areas where you've always been defeated in the past, and suddenly you find, hey, I didn't stumble in that way this time. That's a really good feeling, isn't it? You know?
I wouldn't know.
I think you do. But that's actually really good when you start to think, wow, I never thought I could be like that, and I was.
Yes.
That's really
okay. There's
encouraging.
More comments in here. Okay. Right. Sally commenting on her own comment, so that's good. So that's good and exciting. But this account says they left their nets and followed him. So they left a successful business. It seems immediately, straight away. They walked away from that and began a journey in quite a different direction.
Yes.
I posed a question. What do we think is the requisite? You know, do we have to give up everything?
Well, I was thinking, like for James and John, you know, they left their father in the boat. I wonder what he thought about it. You know, here's the family business, and his two sons have suddenly gone sailing off to follow Jesus instead. You know that. I wonder what his response was, and sometimes, you know, the cost will be that people very dear to you don't always understand.
They won't understand. No.
I think that's often the hardest thing. Actually, it's when somebody whose opinion matters to you doesn't understand why you're doing what you do.
We were having a conversation in a group in church this week where we were saying that for a disciple, the primary love and the primary obedience is to Jesus, and he must come first. And Jesus said, you know. You have to get the relationship with mother and father and brother and sister in perspective. And I know some people have forfeited their calling because other concerns have taken priority over the call of God on their life. And it seems to me, it might not be, but it seems to me they missed out.
But the thing, the whole thing about discipleship is it does mean that you're calling Jesus Lord. And the Lord is the one who gives the orders, and he's the one who comes first. And I think that's often the thing that's hardest of all, is realising that he does have the priority claim. You actually find in practice that that your other relationships are the better for that. You know, it's like, I think, as I think it's Matt was saying earlier in the week, and I know it was certainly true for us, you know, when it came to the sort of the business about getting married, realising that actually for a Christian marriage, Jesus is first. And because he's first, that actually brings a strength into the relationship, because in it you're trying to please him. So at those times when fallen human nature isn't doing too well, there's the third strand, and the one that you're actually obeying, and he's the one that's actually pulling you together, where naturally you might sometimes be falling apart.
Okay, so the challenge, sorry, there's another comment there, because the question was put, do we have to give up everything to follow Jesus? And Maggie says we have to give him our heart and will, so he is in charge. This may or may not mean giving up other things and people, but it is the heart attitude, isn't it?
That's right.
Which was the challenge for the rich young man. In practice, he had to, he was challenged to follow Jesus, but it was his attitude, which is his heart attitude, which was the problem there. It was Neville Palmer who said years ago, hold everything lightly. That things in life we're willing to let go if we have to.
Yes. Well, it's like if I've given everything I have to Jesus, that doesn't mean that that means I never get to enjoy any of that, because actually a lot of the time what you've handed to him, he's allowing you to use, but it's different now because it belongs to him.
I'm reminded of a story from Dale's Bible Week. Some of you will remember them, and it was Bryn Jones talking, and it was his story he was giving in a sermon, and he was talking to a man who was really wanting revival to come, and wanted to be earnest in seeking the Lord. And so Bryn Jones said, oh well, and I can't remember the precise details, but it went something like this. Bryn Jones said, well, there's a prayer meeting on Tuesday evening where we're praying about it. He said, oh no, I can't come to that, I'm watching Coronation Street. and it's when other things, trivial things, become more important.
Yes.
Well,
that's right. You see, it's not that you sort of suddenly become kind of weird ascetic people.
No.
But it's like everything else comes secondary.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And that's actually its proper place, because when he's in charge, everything you need is provided. And everything's in its proper place, and so things don't get out of perspective and out of proportion. Mm-hmm. Whereas if something else is the first priority of your heart, well, it's an idol.
Yes.
And idols always lead you into deception and destruction. Mm-hmm. Even if that idol is your dad, your wife, your child, your job, whatever.
So we're not making this up as we go along. Can I read what Jesus says? Matthew 10, verse 37. Anyone who loves his father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. That's why, Jesus isn't just a nice teacher. He is saying some astounding things. Anyone who loves his father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves his son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And anyone who does not take his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. So that goes back to that quote I gave at the beginning, Dietrich Bonhoeffer. When Jesus calls, he calls us, he bids us to come and die. And that is that willingness.
Yes. Well, see, for Jesus, it's the whole principle of his life was laying down his life.
Yes.
And choosing to do what pleased his Father rather than what he would naturally want to do. Mm-hmm. And I think it's the same for us. It's not that you sort of have to kind of try and think of the worst thing and do that. Mm-hmm. It's actually just that, the choices are his, the plan is his, the purpose is his. And the trust bit is actually knowing that his will, as it's in Romans, it says, is good, pleasing, perfect in every way. Yeah. You discover that when you lay down your life as a living sacrifice. Yeah. You begin to discover that actually God's plans were better than yours. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But as long as somebody doesn't trust him to have a better plan than yours, to that degree, you're always held back from really experiencing life in all its fullness that he wants you to have.
Again, I want to quote, this is from Matthew 19, verse 28. There's been a discussion about who can be saved, but this comes at the end of it. In verse 28, Jesus said to the disciples, I tell you the truth, at the renewal of all things, when the Son of Man sits on his glorious throne, you who have followed me will also sit on 12 thrones, judging 12 tribes of Israel. And everyone who has left houses or brothers or sisters or father or mother or children or fields for my sake will receive 100 times as much and will inherit eternal life. But many who are first will be last, and many who are last will be first. And so Peter, just prior to that, had said to Jesus, "We have left everything to follow you. What then will there be for us?" And so that was his testimony. I've given up everything. I've done as you've asked. Yeah. But Jesus saying, actually, well, it's what we know. God is no man's debtor.
That's right.
You can't outgive God.
No. Yeah. And basically, you know that ultimately, when you have the benefit of hindsight, you know it's worth it.
Yes.
It's definitely worth it. And the thought of having missed it irrevocably would be awful.
Yes. What might have been? What might have been? So we're going to conclude. So, but to finish on a celebratory note, Matthew 9:9. Why have I put that down there? I've got to read it myself.
9 verse 9. That's when he's calling Matthew.
Yeah, the call of Matthew. Do you want to? I've talked a lot. Just read that.
The whole passage?
Yeah, till 12.
As Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. "Follow me," he told him, and Matthew got up and followed him. And while Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, many tax collectors and quote sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" On hearing this, Jesus said, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. But go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners."
Just keep going, because it's the next bit. Yeah.
Then John's disciples came and asked him, "How is it that we and the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast?" Jesus answered, "How can the guests of the bridegroom mourn when he is with them? The time will come when the bridegroom will be taken from them, then they will fast." Is that the bit you want? Or do you want me to go on?
Go on. Okay. We'll finish with this.
Yeah. No one sews a patch of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, for the patch will pull away from the garment, making the tear worse. Neither do men pour new wine into old wineskins. If they do, the skins will burst, the wine will run out, and the wineskins will be ruined. No, they pour new wine into new wineskins, and both are preserved.
And here we've got this picture of the community that Jesus is forming, and people are criticising them for not being sort of po-faced and sober and following all the righteous rules and things like that. And Jesus is illustrating that actually following him is a delight.
Yes.
Okay. How can you go around looking miserable while I'm with you? The time will come, and it does come when he dies, but then that's only for a brief time, and we look forward to him coming again when there will be the great celebration.
Yes. But he's saying that's right. That this is it, and it's a whole new thing. It's not just a new code of rules or a new form of prayer life or
the picture of the burst wineskin and things like that.
It's basically becoming a disciple of Jesus is a whole new life.
Yes.
It's not an add-on to the old one. No, adding another activity to your timetable or a new idea to your.
Yes,
new hobby or something.
A pick and mix. I like this bit about the Christian faith. I'm not sure about that, so I'll sort out and I'll put it in the order of what I like it. No. It's a whole package. It comes like new wine poured into this wineskin that fills it.
Yes, and it is completely new. That's why when Jesus was talking to Nicodemus and he's saying to him, actually, becoming a son of the kingdom, you have to be born again. You start a whole new life.
Yes.
You don't just make a few adjustments here and there, which is very radical.
It is. We're past the hour.
Oh, right.
Okay. We haven't talked about the Jesus choosing the 12. I'm sure that will come up during
the series.
During the series, because this was just the introduction. So thank you for joining with us.
Nothing else we need to add?
No. Okay, Sally just giving us another quote there, that's fine. Well, it's worth saying that whole thing's loosely, Sally thinks it comes from Corrie ten Boom. That's helpful. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us, whether you're live or if you're watching this later. The series will continue next week, and then the week after that we have an interview. Okay, so we'll say good night to you now. Okay, good night.
Bye.